he said, look, if they can show up on time once a week to play soccer and pay their league dues on time, they're probably pretty good people. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. We are back with a special episode, the Flip the Script episode. So what you're seeing this year in Season 2 of the Exit Is Now podcast is every 3 to 4 episodes, we're flipping the script. We're having, instead of a me interviewing one of the guests, what we're having is the guest interview me. And what I've asked is our executive leadership team to come onto the show, people that are very close to me, both in business and in my personal life, to ask me a few questions about our journey together, growing the Exit Planning Institute, and what it perhaps means to be a business owner that has lived a more value acceleration-centric life. I have one of my best friends joining us today. A lot of you know him, I think, across the EPI board. He's worked, I think, 9 years here now, Josh, working on our ninth
year. Yeah.
Working on our 9th year, one of our longest-term employee and teammate here at EPI. But he has done, if you're certainly a more veteran SEPA with us at EPI, Josh came in to run events and then moved over to member experience, moved over our sales team, and then more recently joined our executive leadership team and oversees all of our strategic and what we say our VIP relationships here at EPI. So you've done a little bit of it all, Josh, but looking forward to the Flip the Script show. So welcome. And the microphone is really yours, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back again.
Yep.
I guess the first episode wasn't that bad if you invited me.
No, oh yeah,
invited
this
me
is
there.
your second episode.
Yeah. I think
Very
it was about
cool.
a year ago. Scott asked not to see the questions in advance, so these are certainly unrehearsed.
Perfect.
So we'll see where it goes. But I know last time, and we'll certainly get to it again in a little bit, I want to talk about obviously the growth and experience here at EPI, but I wanted to take it back a little bit prior to our time together at EPI, do a little personal reflection, I guess, if you will. So all the way back to when we first met, and I don't remember, it was 2010 or 2011. It was one of those years when you were hosting the pre-Thanksgiving party buses.
Right? Yes, the old limo nights.
Limo bus. And so one of our mutual friends, we got introduced through a mutual friend, also named Scott Cunningham. He said, "You want to go on this limo bus? Scott Snider's does it every year. It costs $50 a person or whatever it was." And I said, "Sure, let's do it." So we're driving there, and I said, "Where does he live?" And he said, "Oh, he's over on Cranage Road." Yeah. I said, "Cranage Road?"
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's funny because that's the first street I remember living on."
Yeah.
So, I know we've talked about it, but from your perspective, what do you remember? What do you remember about that night?
Oh, I remember it actually very, very vividly. I guess I would say, So I thought that was pretty wild. You walked in. So the first thing I guess I remember walking in, Josh is a little bit younger than me. But Scotty, your buddy and our friend is my age, right? Scotty's like my age. Yeah. And so he had known you from high school, I believe. And so we had basically all of our college friends and people that scattered around. I was just getting out of college, I guess. We're still scattered around. So we would all get together on that day before Thanksgiving because most people were back home in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'd get a core group together and we'd take a party bus out and hang out, right? And to reunite with some of our friends that had moved away. And Scott said, "Hey, can I bring my buddy Josh?" And so the first memory that I have is when you walked into that back door. So I have like a big long driveway, and then everybody kind of comes in through the back, which opens up to a kitchen in a bar area. And you shook my hand, like a nice, firm handshake, and you said, "Hey, man, I just really appreciate you inviting me out, and thank you for letting me be a part of the group." And I always just thought that was super unique. I don't think, especially in today's world, fast forward to 2024, I don't think you get that sense sometimes of a good firm handshake and a really an appreciative of thank you. So I do certainly remember that. And after we kind of opened up, you talked about Cranage Road. So and quite literally the house that I had bought, I think it was 2010, because the house that I had just bought that house in 2009. You lived and grew up in part like 5 houses away.
Yeah, you can see it.
So like, what? He's like, after shaking my hand, he was like, "Hey man, weird story. I actually grew up over there in that house." And so, I remember that day and that first interaction, quite vividly.
Yeah. So and a little bit different, I guess. A lot of the people were coming back for that event, out of towners coming back home to Cleveland. I was living in Cleveland at the time. but shortly thereafter moved away to Columbus. And certainly stayed in touch. I was just reminiscing over those couple of years, a couple whirlwind trips, we call them, Chicago, Las Vegas. You came down. We went to the 2015 MLS Cup. And they hosted it in Columbus.
The Columbus Crew.
Matter of fact, we were just talking about this when we were hanging out last night, kind of prepping for the show. We tell the story a bunch, but how you and our other buddy Dan came down to Columbus and visited the night before I went on my first day with Ashley. My now wife.
Your now wife
at the time. Little did we know, but remember that was some fun years. But certainly stayed in contact. And
absolutely,
one of the more memorable moments, I guess, for me from that time period when I was living in Columbus was when you guys started the Cleveland Freeze. Took over the Cleveland Freeze, and the inaugural game was in Cincinnati. And I was living in Columbus, and I drove down to Cincy for the first game. And that was actually the first time I ever met Chris. Was
my dad,
in Cincinnati. So I wanted to, from a business ownership perspective, ask you a little bit about that. Like, what was ownership experience like of the Freeze? Certainly probably a little bit different than EPI and EPI at the time.
Really taking me down memory lane. And that's another moment that I remember quite. You're right. Is that though you moved away, so for our listeners, Columbus, Ohio is about 2 hours, give or take, south of Cleveland, Ohio. And it's always hard, if anybody has ever experienced that before, having somebody so close move so far away, right? Still 2 hours away, but I didn't get to see you like every week anymore. But we went down to Cincinnati, Ohio, which is about 4 hours south of Cleveland, and then another, so 2 hours south of Columbus, 4 hours south of Cleveland. And we played our inaugural game, which is obviously our first game was an away game. And so maybe some backstory for our listeners is that I guess what's actually it's a very interesting. The first thing I think of when you say that when you tell that story of that moment in life is that I wasn't very focused back then as a business owner, right? I wanted to do a lot of things, right? And I saw mentors of mine who were quite a bit older. So I guess back then that was probably 10 years ago. So I was like 27 years old or so, 28 years old. And so being a very wild-minded, ambitious entrepreneur, I was certainly running the Exit Planning Institute, but I invested some money into a professional indoor soccer team that played in what was called the MASL, the Major Arena Soccer League. It's the highest level of professional indoor soccer that you can play in America. And I had the opportunity, after selling my business in 2010, to play in that league and play and kind of live out a dream for me, right? Play and get paid to play a professional sport. And so although kind of like the Arena Football League, if you will, certainly everybody had a day job and you were traveling on the weekends and practicing in the evening, but certainly a professional outfit. And I played for a team called the Ohio Vortex. And the Ohio Vortex shut down after like 4 or 5 seasons, and the license to operate a Northeast Ohio team came to be. And so I got a ownership group of people together, and we invested in a franchise license to bring professional indoor soccer back to Northeast Ohio. For many of us, maybe in the Ohio area, or maybe some of these major markets with the Midwest markets with professional indoor soccer teams, we had a franchise called the Cleveland Crunch that was historic here in Northeast Ohio and in the league. I didn't want to replicate their name, so we ended up calling ourselves the Cleveland Freeze, because it's certainly freezing here in the winter months when we played. And started this professional business where I was professional soccer team where I was the president and general manager. And I could tell you, I knew very little about managing professional athletes or creating great athletic teams, to be totally honest with you. But yeah, I mean, I think what was going kind of through my mind at that point is I was still trying to live out a dream, kind of even at 28 years old, still kind of young, ambitious, and not very focused business owner, thinking that you can put you could own multiple businesses at one single time. And the one key there is that for those that are involved in the EPI community, if you rewind 10 years, EPI was still a pretty young business. It was almost still like an infant or startup business. And so at the time, I probably had 3 or 4 companies that were all infant startup businesses. And if any of our listeners have done that before, they kind of need your attention. And so I was spread at that time very thin. But I do remember having you come down to Cincinnati, where I believe at the time the team was the Cincinnati Saints. I think the ticket is actually hanging on the other side of this podcast wall in our hallway. But you came down for a bucket list signing.
Mm-hmm.
So if people know me well, I have a 125 item bucket list. One of the things was to own a professional franchise, a professional sports franchise. So sitting next to Josh with a cold draft beer and my dad sitting next to me, who was also one of our investors, one of our owners, I knocked that thing off, literally crossed that thing off the bucket list. But that was a big day. And then we all went out to after orders to like Dave and Buster's or something, if you remember, right?
BJ's.
BJ's
Brew House.
Oh,
Yep.
yes.
I sat next to Chris, and he that was really the first night.
Yeah, it was the first time I spent time with my dad.
Yeah, it was a big night, certainly. I remember I have a picture. I don't post on Instagram much anymore, but back when I was more active Instagrammer, I guess.
Yes.
I have a photo of you checking that off the bucket list. Pretty cool moment.
It was a pretty cool moment.
It was. As a friend,
for
sure. So I guess fast forward a little bit from there. It's the mid 2015, perhaps, right? So you've now transitioned EPI headquarters back here to Cleveland.
Correct. Yep.
You're running the team.
Wow.
Right? Like you're in charge, and you're starting to build. And one of the, I guess, stipulations, if I remember, you told Chris when Chris said, "I want you to run this," is you said, "I want to build my own team." You want to be able to build your own team. I think that was probably a big leap of faith for him. Maybe to say, "Sure,
we'll take this major investment that we have, and I'll let you run with it."
Yeah. So I know we started talking maybe mid 2015 about the opportunity to come back and work for EPI and for you and Chris. And I remember we were sitting in your upstairs office on Cranage Road again.
Back to old Cranage Road.
Thanksgiving break. I think you had just come home from a SEPA program.
Yep.
And you were still, you had a couple employees, so you were selling SEPAs. So you said you sold a couple, I think, in the airport on the way out there to hit the goal for the year. So it was pretty big. And at the time we said, I think this is going to be something we want to do, but it'll probably be mid next year and towards the end of 6, 9, 12 months from now. Yeah. So we're like, that works. I'm living in Columbus. I've got a pretty serious girlfriend. And I remember I was working in logistics at the time. So I'm sitting in a truck terminal and at work, and my phone buzzed. I looked on Scott, you text me, and you said, "Do you know anything about running events?" And I said, "Sure don't." You said, "Sounds great. When can you start?" And so
yeah, man, that's friggin' wild.
Yeah, so we expedited the conversation, and then it was like, I think January 4th. I wrote the dates on here. January 4th, I accepted the offer letter. Proposed to Ashley on January 8th, and then we moved to Cleveland on February 6th. So pretty big start to 2016 for sure, and then started a couple weeks middle of February 2016. But I guess that was there were some things. Obviously some things happened faster than planned. I guess what was that like? Think back to the early days of EPI. Like what was just kind of what's the culture, the vibe then?
That's like multiple memory lane moments, man. You hit me when you hit me with the Cleveland Freeze. You really got me thinking, right? So for our audience too, and maybe again going back to a life lesson, is that I always said that you had to have in business, right? Is that you, and one of the reasons that we hired you, where I was doing so much inside of EPI now at the time, that I needed somebody. I always say kind of wake up giving a shit about that particular thing, right? You need somebody concentrated 40 hours a week to really make that thing go. And that was really I had that personal experience with the Cleveland Freeze where I was not working 40, 50 hours a week in that business because I also had the Exit Planning Institute business that we had just bought in late 2012. And so, again, I was spread very thin. So the Cleveland Freeze made it one season. We lost $80,000. And all the investors said, hey, man, this is kind of, I guess, an expensive hobby, but I'm not in. And kind of a shame because in our inaugural season, we went to the Final Four of the entire league. Now, we lost in the Final Four, but what a thing to do, your first run right out of the gate. So we ended up shutting that thing down. And then it's kind of weird how things work because our business Exit Planning Institute was growing so rapidly that the gentleman running the business for us at the time, that was still based in Chicago, couldn't keep up with our growth. So yeah, my dad asked me. He said, "Hey man, we own this thing together, but I really think it's time for you to get out of Aspire Management, get out of the Cleveland Freeze, and dedicate your entire time to Exit Planning Institute and fulfill our growth strategy and our vision." And to your point, yeah, Dad said, number one, we knew the business had to be relocated back home to Cleveland. I certainly wasn't leaving. And I said, when we do that, the one thing I certainly need is be able to develop a team around me. And so my mindset at that time, because I had grown a business before, right? And we're kind of at square one again. We maybe had a couple hundred SEPAs. and maybe we had 2 classes a year and maybe 20 people in a class, so maybe 40 new SEPAs a year versus the 2,600 SEPAs that become new people that become SEPAs in today's world. But I think my first thing is that I am a purebred entrepreneur. I don't look at college degrees. I don't even quite literally know what your college degree is in. I knew that I needed to surround myself with people that I could trust, people that I thought were also very entrepreneurial, and people that wanted to take a chance, roll the dice, and grow something big, and grow something that was not just big in terms of scale, but big meaning impact and influence, somebody that had the similar type passion. So I think when we worked with you, we had 2 like administrative type assistants that were helping us, but we needed somebody, again, more strategic and more executive, somebody more as a leader. So I said to you on that blue rocking chair in my home office back on Crane, and I said, Josh, I want to hire you. And you said, dude, I like broker freight right now. I don't know anything about event management. And I said, dude, I'll teach you. Neither did I. I used to run a friggin' lawnmower and plant trees and plow snow. So we can learn together. And I told my dad had grown to know you as well, thinks of you like a son as well, and said, if Josh is your guy, I'm in. So let's bring Josh home. The biggest thing I remember, dude, though, about that is your mother seeing me in person. So if she's tuning into this episode, I remember this. I think I was at your house, and she gave me a big hug, one of the probably the biggest hug to date that she's ever given me. And she looked at me and she said, "Hey, I just want to thank you for bringing my son home." So if you know the Koza family, they are pretty much, I would say, an example of family values, right? So whatever the Koza family values are, I think we could all take a little bit of that and apply it to our family. But what also makes your family seem so tight. And so having their son away, even 2 hours away, was a lot for Mrs. Koza, that is for sure. So I remember that. And so really I hired you for your mentality, right? You're obviously a skill, you have the skills, but you had the mentality that we needed. And we're like best friends. So I was like, well, let's go make this happen. But and most people that came after you in that leadership capacity came with that similar growth mindset, but with very little experience inside of what we were actually doing. But nonetheless, it was that was like a big impact moment. That was the first strategic leader that EPI hired was you. So it was, and then boom, 9 years later, we're still rocking and rolling.
Here we are.
It was a pretty damn good hire, right?
If you say so. I guess.
Yeah.
So, awesome. Yeah. No, I think I would call back to a comment you said.
Sure.
You were a little more wild-minded, ambitious, lack of focus. Then I'd say 2 of those 3 are still true. I'd still say the wild-minded, ambitious, certainly, but maybe a little more focused. And I think during the hiring process, I remember it was pretty informal, right? There was no sit-down interview. We were in your office, I guess.
I don't think there was at all, right?
No real interview. And I think you asked me at one point to put together or send over a resume because Chris wanted to see it. Like that was I guess we do that.
Interesting that you say that too, though, because even my dad, Chris, was a little bit more, I would say, a little bit more formal and corporate versus just like wild, ambitious entrepreneur, right? And I always say that that's one of the reasons, or actually I was just talking about this before we jumped on the podcast with one of our certified exit planning advisors. I think one of the reasons Dad and I made such a great team is that Dad comes with that system that you all have as certified exit planning advisors and allows somebody that's wildly ambitious like me to get a little bit more frame. So I was like, I know you know Josh, he's hired, and I think you were already hired, but he said, can I get a formal resume though? And I was like, oh yeah, I guess I never did that. But nonetheless, I think it's worked out for sure. Time for a break?
Yeah, so you want to take
time for a break? Yeah, so we're going to take a quick break, transition in some more stories. So stick with us, and we'll be right back.
Are you a business owner seeking to unlock the true potential of your enterprise? Look no further than the second edition of Christopher Snider's revolutionary book, Walking to Destiny: 11 Actions an Owner Must Take to Rapidly Grow Value and Unlock Wealth. In this updated edition, Snider presents proven strategies for maximizing your company's value and accelerating growth. Whether you're aiming to sell or simply want to ensure long-term success, this book offers a blueprint for building a thriving, self-sustaining business. Walking to Destiny isn't just another book, it's a game changer, backed by Snider's own experience as a successful business owner and as a SEPA. This book bridges the gap between business owners and advisors, guiding you towards financial freedom. But don't just take our word for it. Hear from those whose lives have been transformed by its insights. One satisfied reader raves, "The best guide for transitioning out of privately owned companies. I recommend it to all business owners and advisors." Another praises it on its focus for maximizing business value, calling it their, quote, principal tool for educating owners. Ready to take control of your business's destiny? Visit walkingtodestiny.com now and use code EXITISNOW to claim your free copy of Walking to Destiny. 11 actions an owner must take to rapidly grow value and unlock wealth. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Make the moment perfect by seizing this opportunity today.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit is Now podcast, hanging out with Josh Koza. It's a flip the script kind of episode. So again, if you're just tuning in, every 3 or 4 or so episodes, we flip the script. So I am not hosting our conversation today. Josh is, and I am technically his guest on the show. So Josh, again, is our longest employee, working in his 9th year here at the Exit Planning Institute, a dear friend to me and my family. So a really cool set of memory lane kind of questions if you turned into the first segment of the show. So let's continue the conversation and see where we go.
Yeah. So we ended talking a little bit about the hiring process when I started in 2016, and I guess the perhaps lack of formality there, as some might consider it. So now at 35 employees now here, up from 5 at the time when I started. Certainly there's been some changes in the hiring process. You know, we talked about, I guess back then you were hiring a little more off the cuff, kind of tapping into your friend group, I guess, right? So what were the couple, and you hinted on this before, but like what were the key sort of things that you were looking for at the time for someone to bring on board?
Yeah, I think if you look at the friend group, if you will, I think with some of our SEPAs, we were, back when we were at the Exit Planning Summit and people meeting exit planning teammates, there's always said there's a little soccer tie, and you even have that soccer tie too. So if you know me well, I'm pretty involved in our soccer community. I owned that team that you talked about, played, coached, managed, and currently still play. So a lot of people, I always said, there's a gentleman that was a mentor in my life, owns a company named No Shock here in Cleveland. His name is Chris Cole. You know Chris. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Chris used to also hire a lot of people inside of the soccer community that played on competitive or beer league type teams that he would manage as in an adult league. And he said, and I asked him this question one time. I said, "Chris, why does everybody that I think works at No Shock also play on your soccer teams?" He goes, "Well, it's actually they play soccer with me first, and then I hire them." And he said, "Look, if they can show up on time once a week to play soccer and pay their league dues on time, they're probably pretty good people." And so, that's
the benchmark.
And that's what I'm saying. He's like, that's the minimum thing. But, and from playing in the league that we play in, and people don't show up, there are no call, no shows, and they, they don't pay their fees, they don't pay their league fees. So he said that's the baseline. So of those people, and then we build this camaraderie, and then they come into my business. And maybe similarly is that I hired out of our friend group because I was looking for similar things in you. We hired you first, and frankly, it was going so well that I said, look, again, I want people that I can trust. I believe that you can coach anybody to really do anything, right? So if you have to have the skill set, right? So like I can't necessarily make you an estate planning attorney or make you an accountant, but if you're a visionary, an operator of a company, sales folks, marketing folks, I can kind of teach you the trade and teach you about my business if you come with the right skill set. So skill set aside, we said if they have the skills, who are people that I trust, who are people that are loyal, who are people that are visionary, that want to or want to execute, but really, truly, again, want to be a part of something fun and impactful and grow a company. And so as we started to hire, even in that loose way, that's how we got pretty much the executive team that you see today, primarily, you, Jocelyn, Paige, Jesse. For those of you that know Chase, who's our product development manager, also on our executive team, he was on one of our Flip the Script episodes earlier this year. He was the only non-friend that I've hired on that executive team, if you think about it, right? He was not in my personal life at the time that he entered our business. So that was the mentality back then, but it was probably as loose and informal as it was with you, at least in terms of hiring those types of folks.
Yeah, and I think overall we have I'd say we have a pretty low turnover rate as a company.
Yeah,
I think
nowadays,
that as we've grown, we've seen more of that. I think that's probably just harder to control as you have a larger company. There's just more likelihood that someone's going to leave. But I think that core group of friends, soccer community, right, most or all of them are still here or have left and come back in some cases.
Yeah.
So that's I think a testament to the way in which you pick those people to come on board. Now we're hiring, and I think at any given time we usually have at least one job posting online for some position.
Man.
But you're not involved in the hiring process at all anymore. So what's that like for you? Like having kind of let go
Such
of
a good question. That is my biggest challenge of the last 18 months, right? So to your point, when nowadays we actually, so anybody that is hiring and maybe struggles with hiring a little bit too and finding great people, is we try to put people in little groups or little packs. So, we'll hire 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 people at a given time, so that they can go through their training and form some camaraderie kind of like early on in their journey of becoming a part of the EPI team, kind of go through things together. But I would say it is probably one of the most challenging emotional things that I've done in my business career is that, to your point exactly, like hiring our 35th, 36th employee, I don't have that relationship with them, and maybe nor should I, like I have with you. And being so far removed from your people seems a little bit, it is just a little bit difficult, because for so long, guys like you and I have been hanging out 9 years growing this company, that I just I don't even have the time necessarily to get to know people on a deeper level like you. But I can tell you, I might have told this story on the podcast before, but this year was a major impact moment where our director of marketing, Paige, did this to me, where my office here at EPI sits where I could see the parking lot on our front door. And we had hired a big group of people, and Paige's team is probably the second largest team that we have at EPI, the marketing team. And we had hired somebody new, and ever since you came on board, we've always had this tradition where we go have a EPI lunch together. So new employees come, and I always say, look, like, go to an extended lunch. We'll go like 2 hours to lunch, get to know people, break some bread together, maybe even have a drink together, and just have some fun on day one of your journey here at EPI. And so anyways, I see Paige walk out the door with like 6 or 7 other people, and I'm like, well, I wonder why this like mass leaving of people is going on. And it dawned on me, like, oh, we have a new person that just started today, and that's the 2-hour traditional EPI welcome lunch, and I didn't get invited. And so it was a big deal for me, and kind of just growing my own business, knowing that my role in the business isn't necessarily having the deep relationship with every single buddy, every single person here at EPI, and then hopefully coaching you all to have those types of experiences with your teams. But I would say that it is kind of a really different thing to decentralize yourself as a business owner. It's like one of those things where, what is the saying, like, get comfortable being uncomfortable, for sure.
Sure, yeah. And one of the, I guess, cool things about, for me, working here, right, at the Exit Planning Institute, is that we're practicing what we preach, so to speak, right? We're
100%.
teaching value acceleration through the CPO credentialing program, through the academy courses, right? But
No
that's
doubt.
literally how you and Chris and our team operates the business every single day. What do you think, in your opinion, is the hardest part as an owner about implementing value acceleration in your company?
So that is a really good question, but I got to answer 2 ways. Because the first, and you know this better than anybody, like, I grew up through the value acceleration methodology, so I don't want to, it's just a unique situation for me, but one of the messages that we're trying, I think, drive home here in the EPI community, at least, and maybe for the entire business owner community across the United States, is there's a huge change in mentality that you have to have. And so I would set up the answer like this, is that I think for many business owners, the hardest part, not me, but for many business owners, the hardest part is changing your mindset. I think many business owners go through their entire career as a business owner, growing very successful companies, generating great income, providing great opportunities, great meaningful products and services, but they're not translating what that income means to value. So they're not going from success to what we call an EPI, going from success to significance. And so I think the biggest part in implementing value acceleration is that, particularly for somebody that's been doing it for years, like a baby boomer business owner, or maybe some of our older, more veteran Gen Xers, saying, hey, man, you've grown a successful company over 20 years, but now you got to flip your mentality and learn a whole new way of doing business after 20 years of doing probably a lot of things right. But what you weren't doing is creating a value creator type company, or you weren't driving towards more significant. So for many owners, I think just relearning how to run a business with value in mind is probably one of your hardest things. But once you can unlock that mentality, I'm telling you, your whole world changes. And then for me, and maybe in today's world with running the value acceleration methodology, I would say the core part of, at least from the business, right? So 3 legs of the stool, all that kind of stuff, not to get too technical. But from the business leg, I would say the hardest part about like embracing value acceleration is what we were talking before in the hirings process, is decentralizing the business owner from the business, which means it's really not my vision anymore. It's our vision. And it's not just the vision of the executive team, but it's really a collective vision of all 35 or 36 people that work for EPI. And the fact is that you don't agree as the owner. I don't agree with everything. And it might not be the pure vision that I had for our business. And so letting go a little bit, that decentralization, to allow other people to partake in your vision, I think that's a stepping stone towards decentralization of the owner. Is that it's not about me. It's not about my dad, Chris. It's about our community, which includes both our certified exit planning advisors, our partners that support them, and our internal employees. And that's where we got to go. So that's pretty difficult, though, because like this is my livelihood. This is my baby, if you will. And then I would always say, for me, it's the millennial in me. Personal planning, I think, is good. I'm pretty in tune to personal planning. I know what I want to do next. I just wrote my 10-year vision, personal vision this year. But it's the personal financial planning. It's that 1966 Ford Mustang that I bought. Like if a financial advisor truly, my financial advisor says the same thing, but if any financial advisor that's a SEPA looked at my financial portfolio, you would probably say, Scott, we got to diversify this thing a little bit. I'm a pretty traditional business owner. If I had extra money outside of buying cars, I would invest it into my business. So I do struggle with the financial leg of the stool as well when it comes to how do I, embrace the value acceleration methodology.
Sure, yeah, and so you talked about value, decentralization a couple of times now being a bit of a challenge, and I think as an organization, we've done a pretty good job at this point of decentralizing Chris,
sure,
from the day-to-day operations of the business, freeing him up to do more speaking, teaching, writing, things that he's really passionate about, that he loves. And certainly we're in the process of trying to decentralize yourself, and one of the challenges that I think maybe us as leaders of the organization experience that I know you've talked about having experience with Chris is like transitioning the perspective or mindset of the community that it's not the Scott show, right? It was kind of like, what was the Chris show when Chris created the methodology, wrote the book. Then it's like, now it's Scott's the face of EPI, right? Is helping, I guess, elevate the leadership team and the managers and everyone at the company to a position where they're not asking so much for Scott's time. It's like, I whoever the right person is, right?
Yes.
It's the organization versus.
That is a difficult thing too, though, is that I think you probably experienced this in your new role, is that many of our, and if you're listening and you're one of our partners, our strategic partners, many of our partners for, I guess, probably 7 years worked with me directly. And now we're saying, look, given that such a kind of a core part of what we do, and frankly, a core part of helping our certified exit planning advisors grow, is that we wanted, again, somebody waking up every single day caring solely about how do we develop, how do we maintain, and how do we grow our relationships with our strategic partners so that we could better grow our SEPA and support, really, our SEPA community. And most of those people that used to be working with me now work with Josh and Katie and on his team. And so I just think that it is kind of a mindset shift to say, like, no, I'm not the guy, and quite frankly, I don't even know what the right answer is. So please go work with Josh or go work with Paige or Chase and so on and so forth. So that's also kind of a learning curve, I think, in the business. Is now imagine a baby boomer business owner who might have a customer relationship for 25 years and now is saying, hey, don't work with me anymore. work with my relationship manager, or work with my director of business development, or work with my director of strategic relationships. And so I just think that that is also a difficult thing in decentralization that you have to be aware of, is how do your customers feel? How do your members feel in my situation? And how do our team feel? Because that makes you feel a certain way where they say, Josh, I know you could make this decision, but I need to talk to Scott. And what's funny and what we're not picking up on is, well, Scott doesn't even know the right answer, man. Like, you could work with me. And I think for many of us listening that might work with us in those capacities, quite literally knowing that the person that makes the final decision is sitting right here. It's really not my final call, because on my pathway to decentralization, if I'm always overriding something that Josh has put together, well, then we're actually not getting to that goal. We have to literally trust that he has been embraced our culture, understands our customers, and understands the things I would do and would not do, puts his own kind of spin on it, and makes the right decisions for everybody along the way. So that is, I think, of note for sure.
Sure. It certainly ties back to one of our core values, that accountability with authority.
Absolutely.
So I know, so certainly a lot of life changes for you in the past year. Earlier this year,
4 years.
Just this. I guess just this year specifically, you got married, right? So you have a wife.
Yep.
You have 3 kids.
Yep.
Now that happened quick. So
Insta-dad.
I guess for you, what's been the challenge? What has it been like? Really operating still daily a rapidly growing organization, but also kind of incorporating the personal family side, because for a period of time you didn't have that.
I didn't have that. Yeah. So if you don't know my kind of story from 2024 here, I got married and my wife had 3 kids that were brought into our relationship, and now that we call our family. It's been a pretty amazing experience. I've always wanted kids. I hadn't had the opportunity to have kids, but I became the kids laugh and say, call me Insta-Dad, is that, at basically our youngest, Jolene, was about 3 when I met her. And so now she's 7. And so, yeah, it's been a unique scenario. And to your point, living a certain way for 33 years or 35 years of my life, and being able to kind of almost solely concentrate on growing my business while doing the things I want to do in my personal life, like kind of and whenever. And then having that change at 35 is pretty wild, right? So you've built a whole way of life, and then that rapidly changes. I mean, it's difficult, but I don't think it's any more or less difficult than your life, right? Like, you're an executive at a rapidly growing business in charge of all of our strategic relationships, and you have basically a whole cargo van full of kids that you kind of cart around these days. And I think that nonetheless, managing family life and business life, I think is very difficult. But I think, and what I'd like to say is that I'm much more prepared for that moment because I run with value acceleration in mind. And so, and I'd like, for your family, I'd like to think that because you also embrace this more value acceleration centric lifestyle, this balance of business, personal, and financial goals, I'd like to think that your life is a little bit more balanced because you kind of live top of mind with those 3 things, or you live with those 3 things top of mind. So I would say it's quite difficult. I would say that, I always like to tag on an extra 2 days after the Exit Planning Summit. It's probably time for me to get home if I've been away for 11 days. You change your mentality because it's not just about you anymore. You have a wife, you have kids. They're certainly part of and impact the decisions that you make. But I would say that I think I'm better aligned because I have those 3 things in mind. And I've decentralized my business to the point where, thankfully, this year actually I did the blue blocks, if you will. And for our listeners, if you tuned into season 1 last year, we had Casey Clark on the show, I believe, and Casey talked about how he only works a certain set of hours. And though I always challenge Casey because I don't know if that's true, if he's listening, I don't know if it's true that he only works whatever those hours were. But he said, look, as long as you block it off, you challenge yourself to actually make the right decisions for you and your business. And so I've started a blue block, if you will, on my calendar, where on Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm home by 3 so I can help my kids with homework. And so it does change your life. But I think we're in a position that it allowed me to more easily pivot into those things that I want. But it's the beauty of running Value Acceleration. If you listen to EOS and the people, and Gino Wickman and some of the other people that talk to the EOS way of thinking, they say something about having freedom with multiple passions. And Value Acceleration does the same thing. I think if you're practicing with Value Acceleration in mind, if you have the three legs of the stool in mind, you've decentralized, again, yourself enough where you could make that pivot. But nonetheless, like any parent listening, it certainly changes your life.
Sure. Yeah. And speaking of parents, you're in business with your dad, right?
I sure am. Yep.
I think that could be a whole episode by itself. And maybe it has been. I guess we're having Chris on a couple times.
Yeah, we've had Chris on a few times.
Talking about that. But, for someone thinking about that, right? That's not an opportunity I didn't have growing up. Maybe we don't have a family business. Kind of blue collar family in the trades, right? So very different life that I'm in than
Sure.
that they were. But if that's something that I'm sitting in my position, like I'd love to do with my children, my son or my daughters, one day. It still feels weird.
Yeah,
to say
what does that
daughters,
feel?
plural.
Yeah, right.
But
yes.
What advice would you have? Like, what's been good? Kind of maybe one or two things that stick out to you that's been like cool, and maybe it's been hard for the relationship.
So I think, again, I'd go back and I think the little bit of the background story is also maybe a mentality shift that maybe family business owners can take. So I wasn't working in EPI per se before Dad owned it, right? Like we bought it together. So Dad and I think one of the unique scenarios that we have, and I always wonder how you could replicate this mentality with family business owners. Our friend Tom Deans always talks about don't gift your business to the next generation. They should buy it, or you should sell it and take the wealth and go do something different that the next generation wants. My point in telling our audience that, Josh, is that I think Dad and I are certainly a family business, but we're more business partners than family business, right? Where like there wasn't this business that Dad started and then 20 years later I enter the business as the manager, then I go to the vice president, and then I'm a president, right? I'm an owner, right? I own 49% of the Exit Planning Institute. So it's just more of a business partner relationship. And I think in part that mentality helps us manage our family business better. Is that I don't know if Dad looks at me in whole as his son. Like that's my son, he'll get the business one day. We look at partners and say it could go to me. It could go to our employees. It could go to a third party. We don't know, but we want to be prepared, as the Value Acceleration methodology tells us, to have multiple bites of the apple or have multiple exit options on our plate at any given time. But I don't know how that mentality is embraced, but more of a partner than a fam. Like, that's my son, that's my father. I go, no, that he happens to be my dad, but that's the CEO of our company and my business partner. It's just a swing on things that I think creates a little bit different of a mentality. But I also say that invest in practice. Like anything else in life, whether you want to be a good husband or wife, you want to be a good golf player, good soccer player, or you want to be a good photographer, whatever that is, you have to invest extra time in practice. And so every year, Dad and I practice. We do Tom Dean's Family Business Blueprint. We ask a series of questions about our business. We do the triggering event engagement. And so we're always practicing our communication and the ways that we think. So I think that it's very intentional, it's very deliberate, and it takes extra time and resources. So I think one of the things being in business, and if you were thinking about getting in business with your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, uncles, moms, and dads, that though there's a family component, it is still a business and it's still a financial asset in a lot of people's, or in at least one person's, big financial portfolio. So communication is going to be absolutely critical as well. And I think between those two things, really, Dad, it allows us to have a pretty unique relationship. And you got to commend Dad. I mean, you know my dad well, for him being able to let go and decentralize along the way as well. So you got to commend him for doing that, because it's not easy and it's certainly uncomfortable, especially I think probably at his age too, as he looks to really get involved in the next phases or acts, but let go of something that he's been such an influence on, right? Like Dad this year was inducted into the Exit Planning Circle of Excellence, which acts as the Exit Planning Hall of Fame. He's the guy that created the methodology, wrote the book. Many people even think Dad even started the Exit Planning Institute at times. So for him to really decentralize himself from the business is a big thing too. So you got to, again, I think maybe decentralization is one of the themes that has come out of the show, no doubt.
Sure. Yeah. And maybe not for and I don't know as partners, but it's almost like wearing two different hats. I know as a close friend, just in business together, right? You always talk about us being partners, not boss and employee, but it's you're at work, you're in the office, like you're wearing your kind of work partner hat, and then you're hanging out with the guys. It's the friend hat. So it's almost like being able to
separate
you never
it a
fully
bit.
separate it,
No.
but it's kind of
And it does affect your relationship. I would say that too.
Yeah.
Like our relationship has been affected because we work together every single day. Like it's not like me and Josh are laughing and having fun on the podcast today, but we have had some tough times in our relationship, frankly, from a personal and business standpoint. But we've had some tough times in a business way that affected our personal relationship. So maybe another piece of advice, if you're looking to get in business with friends, with family, is are you ready for it to change your relationship with that person? I underestimated that 10 years ago when you started. I wouldn't change it, but I underestimated the impact it would have on us just being buddies, is that it's not the same necessarily when we go out and hang out. But I always used to call it here at EPI, like when you first started, the firehouse mentality. I am by no means a firefighter. I'm only absorbing what I know from people that I know in my life that are firefighter buddies and maybe from the movies and shows. But you go out and you have this camaraderie that you have working, and then a lot of those folks hang out outside of the firehouse as well. So that separation, but you're so tight because you live together in the firehouse that your families become tight too, and you're in such a high-risk job. I feel the same way growing a hyper growth company, that we're together so much and we're in the trenches so hard together that it develops a unique relationship that also makes us close outside of the business as well. But yeah, it's certainly a unique thing.
Sure. Well, I think the people behind the glass are asking for one more
Another
quick
break?
So
All right,
do a
so
break and
cool.
Come back and wrap up with a few quick questions about personal planning, if you know.
Personal planning. All right, cool. Yeah, we'll take a quick break. We'll be back in just a second.
Hey there, business owners. Are you ready for a game-changing opportunity? Introducing the 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report. Over the past decade, this groundbreaking research has reshaped how we view business ownership and exit planning. This report isn't just another study, it's a deep dive into the evolution of business ownership. It shines a spotlight on the crucial intersection of business attractiveness and owner readiness, revealing the undeniable impact of preparation on achieving successful transitions. With younger generations taking the reins, exit planning is taking on a whole new perspective. Education and awareness about preparing for the future have never been more crucial, and with financial readiness leading the charge, there's a clear opportunity for growth and learning. But here's the kicker. The report shows a surge in exit planning education and understanding, yet many still lack formal transition teams, highlighting the essential role of comprehensive support. So who's got your back? Trusted advisors have evolved from CPAs to financial advisors, making a decade of significant change in support networks. Ready to take the next step towards a successful exit? Dive into the Exit Planning Institute's 2023 National State of Owner Readiness Report and start shaping your legacy today. The future is knocking. Are you ready to answer? Discover your readiness level at 2023ownerreadiness.com and take the first step towards a successful and significant exit.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Exit Is Now podcast. Been hanging out with Josh Koza, our manager of strategic relationships here at EPI, but a dear friend to us and our longest term employee on a Flip the Script episode. So Josh has one last question to ask me, and then we'll wrap up the show. So Josh, fire away.
Yeah, so I think you mentioned earlier, big bucket list guy, 125 items I think on that list. So
Yes,
my big question
no
I
doubt.
wanted to end with is, what's next on the bucket list? What do you think is the next thing coming off that?
Well, I have to go back, since you're on the show, I have to go back. I don't know if you teed this up nicely, but very well done. Maybe, I don't know if this is the answer you're looking for, but I'll tell it. There, many years ago, right before Josh had any kids, we were like basically signed up to go ride a bull in the rodeo. And so they have this rodeo school here in Northeast Ohio where you like go for a weekend and you start one day, you like literally live in the barn with other people that are learning to bull ride. And you do some classes, and then you ride a mechanical bull, and then you ride a real bull, but then you ride the big one at a actual rodeo that they put on where they have all students get out there and ride this bull. So it has been on my bucket list for years to ride a bull in the rodeo, and I always do my bucket list with somebody, right? So and there are all kinds of different things, high impact stuff like bull riding, but like more sentimental and emotional things. But I always try to do a bucket list item together. So Josh and I, several years ago, said we were going to do it. And then Josh kind of got scared on me a little bit because he said, hey, I'm a little nervous about doing this. And I think you said, look, I'm going to be a dad, so I don't know if I should be riding a bull right now as I, start to have kids. So I think we ended up backing out of the rodeo school. But now, I would say the next thing on my list long-term with you is get back on that. Well, we're getting a little old, so I'm, or at least me, right? I gotta get this done before I'm too rickety.
Yeah.
So that would be next on the bucket list. But maybe in more seriousness, my big thing this year is it's more of an emotional one. I'm trying. It was like I wanted to write 1,000 letters to 1,000 people, and so I think I'm on like 300 or something. So I think I'd like to get back in. I've done a kind of high impact bucket list things over the past several years, but being more reflective and maybe hitting some of our more emotional bucket list items is kind of where I'm heading. So it's top of mind for me.
Okay. Well, I'm certainly into comeback bull riding. You've got 3 kids. I've got 4 now.
Yes.
So
yes.
If this is the last time you're listening, kids,
yes.
Thanks for everything.
Yeah. Well, Josh, I appreciate you coming on for the Flip the Script. It's always a little difficult, I think, preparing for these, so I can appreciate getting into the host seat for me and giving me a break for a little bit. Nonetheless, folks, thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, listen, and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. Please spread the word about the Exit Is Now podcast. We will catch you on our next show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you.